Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something pretty significant in healthcare, these tariffs that kicked in during 2025.
Yeah, it's more than just economics, isn't it? It's genuinely changing how medical devices are made and, how they reach patients.
Absolutely. We're digging into a report from Cognitive Market Research today. It just came out this May.
And it gives a really detailed picture, maybe a slightly worrying one, about the ripple effects across the whole medical device industry.
Right. So our mission today, for you listening, is to break down these specific tariffs, see how they're hitting different parts of the medical device world, and importantly, how companies are trying to cope.
Yeah, give you a clear view of what's happening right now.
Okay, so let's jump right in. What are the main tariffs causing all this disruption?
Well, the report really focuses on three big ones. First up, there's a hefty 25% tariff on diagnostic equipment and surgical instruments.
Wow, 25%.
Yeah, especially those sourced from China and other parts of Asia. And this is key because it directly impacts the cost of tools used constantly in hospitals and clinics.
Okay, 25% is a big number.
Yeah.
What's the immediate worry there?
The main concern is that those costs, well, they have to go somewhere, right? They'll likely filter through the system, hitting hospitals, providers, and, ultimately patients.
Makes sense. If an MRI machine suddenly costs 25% more.
Exactly, or complex surgical gear. It's hard to see how that cost doesn't get passed along somehow.
Okay. What's the second tariff?
That's a 20% tariff on medical consumables. Think everyday stuff, but absolutely vital syringes, bandages, gloves.
Things used in massive quantities.
Precisely. And the report notes these mainly come from places known for lower costs, like China, India, Malaysia.
So even if one syringe is cheap, a 20% hike on millions of them adds up fast.
It really does. It puts a huge strain on healthcare systems, especially when many are already, let's face it, stretched thin post-COVID. There's a real worry it could impact patient care if providers have to, make tough choices about what they can afford.
And the third one?
A 15% tariff on raw materials coming from China. We're talking titanium, special plastics, semiconductors, the basic building blocks for devices from pacemakers to implants.
Ah, so this hits right at the start of the manufacturing chain.
Exactly. It pushes up the fundamental cost of making a whole range of devices. It's a major headache for manufacturers trying to manage production costs and keep their supply chains stable.
Okay, so that's the overview. Now let's zoom in like the report does. How are specific sectors feeling this? Let's start with diagnostic equipment.
Right. Diagnostics are very reliant on imported components, things like semiconductors, microcontrollers, display panels. Lots of those come from China.
So that 25% tariff hits them hard.
Directly. A big challenge. We're talking about the core components that make these sophisticated machines work, right? The processing power, the imaging tech.
Yeah, the brains, essentially.
Yeah.
So what are companies doing? The report mentions GE Healthcare, Philips.
They're looking at alternatives, yeah. Exploring suppliers in Europe, maybe India.
But that's not like flipping a switch, is it?
Not at all. The report is clear. Finding new sources can actually mean higher costs initially, and the whole process can delay getting new, potentially better technology to market.
Which puts more pressure on hospitals already dealing with rising costs. They might have to keep older machines running longer.
That's a really key point. It's the whole ecosystem. Okay, what about consumables? Those syringes, gloves, they come from low-cost areas, facing 20% tariffs.
Yeah, what's the fallout there?
The report suggests it could really squeeze manufacturers' profit margins, or maybe more likely, they'll have to raise prices on these basic essential items.
Which, again, hits healthcare facilities hard, especially after the pandemic demands.
Definitely. And we're seeing some companies like Medtronic and Baxter International starting to think about nearshoring.
Nearshoring, moving production closer.
Yeah, looking at places like Mexico or Central America, closer to the U.S. market, potentially avoiding some tariff issues and maybe building more resilient supply lines.
Interesting. Okay, let's shift to the more complex stuff. Implants, surgical devices. They've got that 15% tariff on raw materials.
Correct. Things like titanium, specialty polymers, a lot of that comes from China. So that 15% directly inflates their manufacturing costs.
And the response. Companies like Stryker, Zimmer Biomet.
They're considering bigger moves, according to the report, things like reshoring, bringing some manufacturing back to the U.S., or shifting production to other regions less impacted.
But that sounds like a long-term play.
Oh, absolutely. The report emphasizes this takes serious time and significant investment. Building new plants, training workers, dealing with different regulations.
It's not quick or cheap. So short-term, those higher material costs are just there.
Pretty much. They're a major factor right now.
What about wearables? Fitness trackers, glucose monitors? They seem vulnerable with all their electronics.
They really are. The report says tariffs have already pushed up their costs by potentially up to 20%.
20%,
Yeah. So companies like Fitbit, Abbott Labs, they're having to rethink their sourcing, and we might see price hikes for consumers.
which could affect affordability, especially in developing markets where these devices could be really beneficial.
That's a real concern, yes. Access could be limited.
And finally, orthopedic devices, joint replacements,
Mm.
also hit by material costs.
Yes, heavily reliant on materials like titanium from China. The report pegs the production cost increase there at maybe 15% to 25%.
That's substantial.
It is. So manufacturers are looking at suppliers in Japan, Europe. But again, switching creates delays, cost uncertainties.
Leading back to potentially higher prices for hospitals and maybe even delays for patients needing surgery.
It's all connected.
It really highlights how central China is in all this. The report gives some numbers, doesn't it?
It really does. The scale is, well, staggering. The U.S. imported something like nearly $38 billion worth of medical instruments just from China.
38 billion. Wow.
And that covers everything. Basic surgical tools, advanced imaging, diagnostics, orthopedic stuff, dental supplies, even those everyday consumables we talked about.
So it's not just a few specific high-tech things. It's woven through the entire supply chain.
Deeply woven. And, the report makes another crucial point. Even if we import devices from, say, Mexico or Malaysia or Thailand,
Yeah.
often those countries are using components from China in their manufacturing.
So tariffs on China create these ripple effects, these knock-on effects, even through other countries.
Exactly. It's a complex web. You can't easily isolate the impact.
Okay, so let's talk directly about the manufacturers and the supply side. We know costs are up, but what else are they dealing with?
Well, the core issue is just major disruption. Companies built their whole production systems around easy access to, often lower-cost Chinese parts. Now that's upended. The rising cost of everything, sensors, microchips, plastics, forces these tough choices, absorb the hit, which hurts profits, or pass the costs along.
And the report says price increases are already happening.
Yes, definitely. Seeing hikes of like 10% to 30% on some products, especially the high-tech stuff, imaging, diagnostics, respiratory machines.
And it's not just price, is it? What about actually getting things made and delivered?
That's the other side. We're seeing delays in production, longer lead times to get components, real struggles with managing inventory.
Because of the uncertainty.
Partly uncertainty, partly the complexity of regulations, navigating the tariffs themselves. All this adds cost for healthcare systems and means delays getting equipment to patients.
And as we said, just moving factories isn't simple.
No, the report is very clear on that. Setting up shop in India or Mexico involves big hurdles. Maybe the infrastructure isn't quite there for sophisticated devices, or there's a shortage of skilled workers, or just navigating totally new regulatory systems.
So diversification is the goal, but it's a long, expensive road.
Very much so.
This seems like the perfect place for market research to step in. The report spends quite a bit of time on how it helps companies cope.
It's become absolutely crucial. It provides, actionable insights when everything's changing so fast. It's not just about knowing the tariff rates, but understanding the implications and figuring out how to respond strategically.
Okay, let's break down how it helps. First up, supplier mapping and risk assessment.
Right. Companies need to know who else is out there. Research helps find and evaluate potential alternatives: India, Vietnam, Eastern Europe, wherever.
But it's more than just a list of names.
Oh, yeah. It's a deep dive into their costs, their capacity, how reliable their shipping is, the political situation, the workforce skills, a full picture.
So you can make informed choices about diversifying, building a more resilient chain.
Exactly. Then there's component costs and pricing analysis. Sounds straightforward, but vital now.
Because input costs are rising.
Precisely. Detailed intelligence on component prices is gold right now. Research helps forecast trends, understand material availability, see what different suppliers are charging.
Which gives manufacturers leverage.
It can. Maybe helps renegotiate contracts, find strategic partners, or even switch to more cost-effective components if possible. In a sector with thin margins sometimes, every saving counts.
The report also mentions optimizing the bill of materials, the BVUM. How does research fit there?
That's about dissecting what actually goes into a device. Research identifies which specific parts are most hit by tariffs.
Okay.
Then you can explore alternatives. Maybe a different material works. a different supplier for that specific bit, or even redesigning the product slightly to use fewer pair-fit parts.
Like using locally sourced components
Hmm.
or 3D printing.
Exactly. The report mentions examples like diagnostic equipment, monitoring systems, some dental devices where this is being explored, reducing reliance on those high-cost inputs.
Makes sense. Then there's demand forecasting and price sensitivity, understanding customer reactions.
Yeah, how will hospitals and clinics react if prices go up? Will they delay buying big machines? Can they absorb higher costs for consumables?
Different customers might react differently.
Very likely. Public systems might have different pressures than private hospitals. Research helps gauge these reactions, allowing manufacturers to tailor their pricing to minimize disruption to demand and, protect revenue.
And finally, regulatory tracking and scenario planning, keeping up with rules and predicting changes.
Which is a huge task. Tariffs, trade deals, FDA rules, import-export controls. It's constantly shifting.
So research helps track all that.
Tracks it and helps companies think ahead. What if tariffs get worse? What if a new trade deal emerges? Research allows them to model these scenarios, develop proactive plans, test responses like finding backup suppliers, adjust timelines.
So it sounds like the winners here will be the companies using research to be proactive, not just reactive.
That's exactly right.
So what are some of those actual strategic responses we're seeing companies take?
Well, diversification is definitely a big one. The report points to companies like Medtronic, Abbott, actively expanding operations. India, Mexico, Eastern Europe are mentioned.
Getting production closer or into different regions?
Yep. And some are looking more seriously at reshoring, bringing some production back to the U.S.
What about smaller players?
They might partner up. The report mentions collaborations with regional manufacturers in Southeast Asia or Latin America as a way to adapt without massive capital outlay.
And it's not just geography, right? Technology plays a part too.
Absolutely. Investing in digital supply chain tools, using AI for inventory management, these things help optimize buying, predict disruptions, manage stock better.
Sorry.
And like we discussed with the bomb, some are actually re-engineering products to design out the reliance on certain Chinese parts.
It really seems like success hinges on being flexible, using that research, and thinking ahead.
That really is the core message. You can't just react anymore. You need to anticipate and adapt your whole way of operating.
We've definitely covered a lot of ground. Before we wrap this deep dive, is there maybe one key takeaway or fast fact from the report that really jumped out at you?
Yeah, there is actually. It's the direct confirmation that lots of U.S. medical device firms are specifically using market research right now to check out alternative production hubs. India and Mexico come up frequently.
So it's not theoretical, they're actively doing it.
Actively doing it. It just shows how vital this kind of analysis has become for them to keep supply chains going and blunt the impact of these trade issues.
Okay, so summing up, these 2025 tariffs are clearly causing major upheaval in the healthcare supply chain. Costs are rising, there's disruption, and potentially impacts on patient care down the line.
Yeah, significant challenges.
But the flip side is seeing how manufacturers are responding. They're diversifying, investing in tech, redesigning products. It really underscores how important adaptability and strategic planning are in this global environment.
That captures it well. And, thinking about how interconnected this all is, the global medical supply chain, it leaves a big question for you, the listener.
What's that?
How might future geopolitical events, things we haven't even seen yet, how might they amplify these challenges? Or maybe change the strategies companies need to use? It's certainly something complex to think about going forward.